Hey, welcome to the Raj and Drew Show for entrepreneurs, and we are discussing the relationship between the entrepreneur and sales and entrepreneurs. And Raj, I'm excited about this topic. This is so important that an entrepreneur has the proper mindset, the right way of kind of going in and how they view themselves. And with that, just lay it out for me. What do you see as that relationship between the entrepreneur and sales?
So I want to bring up one big statistic here. Basically, if you look at it, most of the businesses, 80% of the businesses fail within 5 years.
Yeah.
So at least from what I have been mentoring and coaching and everything else, one of the biggest thing I notice is the lack of it is the sales acumen and the sales skills. Because whoever becomes an entrepreneur, they're very passionate about the product or service they're bringing to the table. But each one of those entrepreneurs need to realize that is only 50% of the solution. Coming up with a great product, coming up with a great service, coming up and meeting the needs of the target segment they want to go after. All of this is great. And people get into the entrepreneurship or a small business ownership because of that. But the other 50%, which is the most important piece of it, is running a business.
Yeah.
They have to run a business. So it is a different mind shift. You need to have very, very different qualities for that compared to being an entrepreneur. Some people are very lucky because they have a founder, a co-founder, or somebody, and they might be there who can go back and help them with that mindset. But most of the people, when they start, they're starting and they're wearing both the hats at the same time.
Yeah.
And that becomes an issue piece of it. So if you look at the 50% of the product, service, everything is perfect. They are very, very good at it. That's why they jumped into it. But this is the other piece of it, is the 50% of business building. And that is where it includes strategy, sales, operations, hiring people, hiring contractors, all of those comes.
But what if I say to you, Raj, I say, hey, if I build it, they'll come. If I have a great product, it'll sell itself. I don't have to learn all this sales stuff.
And Drew, that is one of the biggest, what I would go back and say, assumption a lot of people jump into the business, but it is not true. Yeah, if you have a critical mass, yes, I agree with you. Once the critical mass is there, then it can become sustainable. When people start knowing, then they'll go back and look at it. Yeah. But if you really look at it, again, a great example will be ChatGPT, right? They know sales or not, it doesn't matter. But they spent the last 4 or 5 years to bring it to a situation that now everybody knows that everybody is on the bandwagon.
Yeah, they had to sell big time investors like Microsoft, right?
Exactly.
To get behind them and to fund them until they got to that point. That's a great point, because I think if you build it, they will come is something that a great salesperson says to try to be humble, right? They're like, oh, yes. The product just sells itself. No. It doesn't sell itself. You sold it, and you sold it at a high level for many years until it got to that point where, yes, it could sell itself because the quality is so good and everything else.
And even if you look at the scaling up of small businesses and entrepreneurship companies, if you look at the stage 1 to stage 2, from 0 or 1 employee to 20 employees, 80% of the focus has to be is selling every day. 80% of the focus. They don't talk about the product, because without the product, nobody would jump in to become an entrepreneur. So that is a given. We have not seen anything from the product or the service side of it. But everything is from the selling side.
Yeah.
And I remember in 2008 to 9, 10, when there was a huge recession, there were so many people from corporate world, like GEs of the world, the Citibanks of the world, they were all laid off. All of these people are very, very smart people with a lot of skills who can offer a lot of services. All of them became consultants, coaches, mentors in their specific field.
Okay.
But if you look fast forward 2 years, I could not find a single person who was still doing entrepreneurship. They went back to their own thing because they were very good at what they do, but they didn't know how to sell. And after a couple of years, they really struggled with it. And they went back and said, you know what, I'm better off in the corporate world, getting a job and doing what I do best, is provide the skill set.
That's so true. That's so true. So have you had a client have you ever had a client that was, had a great product, but was struggling in this sales area? Is that something you've encountered? What kind of made you passionate about helping your clients understand selling?
I mean, 2 aspects. One, I'll go back to my own experience.
Okay.
Basically, all my life, I was in the corporate world, but never sold anything.
Mm.
So I was selling my ideas, concepts within the confines of the company I worked for, like GE or anywhere else, but I never sold a product or a service.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it really took me 3 years to overcome the challenges to where I could take my company to be profitable.
Okay.
That is the number one thing. So if it takes me 3 years by trial and error, if somebody would have been there to help me to think through and work through that, I think I would have reduced that by at least 60-70% of it. And I would have been ready in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And
so
that is the
basically,
first.
yeah, you're saying that learn from your errors instead of making them yourself.
Exactly. That is the first piece of it. And the second piece of it is I knew at least 3 or 4 people who were outstanding coaches.
Okay.
I would love to go back and hire them as my coach as well. But you know what? They are barely making a living today.
Mm.
So that comes to your point, Drew, saying that, you know what? They're outstanding. I know that.
Yeah.
But they don't have enough clients because they are not able to go back and sell their services.
Mm-hmm.
So I can point out some very, very good people whom I have seen over the last 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And there are some companies they have shut down because of that.
Mm-hmm.
They had great services, they had everything else, but they never got over the hump of selling their goods and services. And basically when pandemic hit, they had to shut down their business.
Yeah, and I think it's so much, it is a mindset. And I'm not even trying to say that I have that mindset mastered by any means. Yes. I think there is so much of how you go into things. Raj, as you know, I have a nonprofit background, and I continuously struggle with pricing properly and with having those conversations about money. It's always just awkward for me. I don't know why. I think it's because that nonprofit background. And I don't mind when other people have the conversation with me. I'm very upfront. I like to be proactive with it with other people when I'm paying for goods and services. But there is something in my own mindset about selling that I still have to overcome, and I still have to battle. And so what is that mindset of an entrepreneur when it comes to sales? What would you define it as?
So there are few things that from a mindset perspective are very, very critical. Anybody in sales, even if it is a seasoned entrepreneur or a seasoned business person, whoever it is, sales is always going to be tough. The reason being is you'll always be hearing a lot of rejections, a lot of no's.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the mindset is very, very important. The first piece of it, I would say, is basically attunement. Are you attuned to your potential client or potential customer or potential lead, whatever you have?
Okay.
And that is the number one piece of it. What you need to go back and look at it. You are the best authority on your product or service. Mm-hmm. But do not go back and trust on people about your product or service. Try to go back and really understand from their point, what are they going through? Mm-hmm. And take the stance of like humility is the word I like to use. Just be humble enough to go back and ask them some good questions and listen to what they need. Yeah. And there is a lot of power in being humble and hearing and listening to them, because that helps you to build trust.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing even empathy, the idea of kind of walking in their shoes, feeling what they feel. And Gary Vee said, he believes, I was watching a interview, and he said he believes that he has the ability to empathize on a mass scale. And that's why he's been successful in marketing, because he's able to feel what the marketplace is feeling, and then offer services and products to meet that need. And so what you're saying is like, don't try to be Gary Vee, right? Don't try to be the marketplace guru. Just focus in on that narrow market that you're trying to reach. Whatever you sell, whether you sell energy drinks or you sell some sort of consulting service to a type of person, target in on that type of person and really connect with what are their pain points, or maybe the terms that we hear in sales, and what are their challenges. So you're saying really, really focus in that way. Exactly.
Okay. Basically, that is where we need to bring it, our cognitive side of it, the logical thinking piece of it, and the empathy, what you were talking about. We need to bring both.
Okay.
need to understand basically what they're saying and what they're not saying.
Okay.
Because reading between the lines becomes such an important piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the third piece, which is very, very important piece of it, is basically what I call is flexing. Basically,
Okay.
some people call it mimicry. You
Okay.
want to understand and try to flex your style to match their style. People like people who are very similar to them.
Yeah.
And that comes from our behavioral sciences as well. If you look at DISC or any of the other tools which we have used, if somebody is very comfortable and they want to have a deep conversation, try to understand that behavior profile and get into that conversations with them.
Yeah.
Somebody is focused on results. So you want to talk from the results point of view. Somebody was talking about, and they love to talk about the experiences of it. So you need to be there. So flexing that style becomes very, very important. That is the mimicry side of it, or the flexing style. And whenever you can do that, the empathy again is increased, and people feel there is a lot of trust established.
Yeah.
People do business with people who are similar to them.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about mimicry and even, being attuned with them. It brings up what Dr. Cialdini talks about in one of his principles of persuasion, which is liking. If you want someone to like you, like them first, right? Like them back.
Yes.
People tend to like people that like them, right? We're drawn to people that are warm to us, that we feel like, hey, they like me. And so work on that, work to understand and to like on the front end your client or potential client, I think would be maybe another way of saying it as well. This is great. This is fantastic. So we've got attunement. Was there anything else on attunement?
That's pretty much from the attunement piece of it.
That's great. Okay.
And the next one is the buoyancy piece of it.
Okay.
Just for this thing, the buoyancy is about balancing the determination with optimism. Yeah. It is a balancing act.
Okay.
You really don't want too much optimism as well, because it will turn some people off.
Okay.
And you want to bring in the right determination to work with people. And if you go back and really look at a lot of things in the market, people keep talking about is, hey, you need to have positive affirmations. You need to be having a positive thinking piece of it. But what I have noticed thing is, instead of really saying the positive affirmation, saying, I can do this, I will achieve this. Those are the affirmations. But if you really go back and look at it and say, can you ask some questions for yourself? Can I do this? Can I achieve this? So what you're doing is you're asking a question for yourself, and you're making it, and you're developing the determination within you. Yes, I can.
Interesting. That's interesting.
And that is where the focus has to be, and the mindset has to be there. I like the affirmation and everything else, but if you start asking the questions, now what you're doing is you're going back and attuning yourself and say, what do I need to do this in this kind of a scenario? What do I need to do? So you're analyzing different scenarios and you're prepping yourself, and that will help you with your determination.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. Even this idea of buoyancy makes me think of a study that I just heard of recently, where they used rats and they attached them to a spring, and they put them in a tube, and they put the smell of cheese on the end of the tube, and they wanted to see how much the rats would pull the spring. So how much strength they would use to pull against that with that cheese. And so they got the measurement, and then they tried a different study. So they had the rat attached to the spring in a tube, and they did cheese on the one end, but then they put the smell of a cat coming behind them. And they pulled even harder. And so the idea is that, and I'm sorry, these rats were starving in both scenarios. Yes. I mean, it sounds bad. I'm just telling you the study, okay?
Yes.
But they were hungry in both situations. But the idea being that we not only need that positive reinforcement, we also need some negative, some consequences behind whatever it is we're going out there. And so I think that plays into that idea of balancing buoyancy and balancing our mindset as we go into these situations. I like that. That's awesome.
A simple question. When I say, can I do this? And you start listing 5 to 6 reasons why and how you can do that. What happens is now you're thinking about the next step in the process, and your preparation and determination and the optimism, all of that is being built while you're doing those questions.
Yeah.
And it draws about the intrinsic and extrinsic ideas, motivations, strategies, all of that are beginning when you ask the right question.
Yeah.
And once you have that, basically that is there and you are much more prepared as well. As we all know, when we prepare very well, we perform very well.
Absolutely. You fight like you train.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And in the buoyancy, when we talk about optimism, basically one of the studies I have seen is basically the positivity ratio.
Okay.
So you want a 3:1. So you want 3 positive, basically notes to every negative experience.
Okay.
So one of the questions they were saying and the research said is somebody had about like 11:1. And he or she was not very successful. The reason is when they're talking so much of positivity after a certain period, people are tuning out of it.
Okay. So you're saying when you're having the conversation with the client, you want to do 3 positives to 1 negative. So you might say, I really like what you're doing here with your organization. The people at the front, the customer service was great. You all are dressed very well, but I'm concerned about, your product. It's not, at the level that I would expect with how you're presenting yourself. Something like that.
Exactly. Something like that.
Okay.
Perfect example there. Basically, you want to always have that built into the process piece.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
So that is the buoyancy piece of it. And the third piece of it is the clarity piece of it. And basically the clarity piece of it is when you go back and look at it in the today's modern world, there is so much of information available. So when you go to a client, they are already reading a lot of things. They are going back and looking at a lot of information that they are working through.
Yeah.
Now you are coming there and you're talking to them and stuff. So your ability there, if you do your basically the logical, the feeling, the thinking, the empathy, and the buoyancy, a combination of all that, if you bring to the table, what can you do? You can hear to everything else. And you can really go back and analyze all of that information and then really start identifying things and pinpointing things that are very important.
Yeah.
Basically the many details and the trivial few important points. Because you need to get to the point where you can get to the point there are a few key points that you have identified.
Yeah.
Once you start identifying that, that becomes very powerful.
Well, I think it's, the idea of clarity. I'll give you an example today. I got an email from a person and they said, hey, I got your information from a friend, which is a former client of mine. And they said I should reach out to you. I'm the HR person at this organization. What services do you offer? Well, you want to, we have websites dedicated to everything that we do, right?
Yes.
And we want to share everything that we do.
Yes.
But I thought, this lady doesn't want to know everything I do. What I worked with on this person was leadership coaching and strategic planning. But I also wanted to let her know that I do communication, because a lot of times HR folks reach out and they go, hey, we got a person that's struggling in an area with their high capacity, great executor, but they don't know how to talk to their people. And so I said, look, I do coaching and training around leadership, communication, and then I've done some strategic planning facilitation with my clients. And that was it. 1, 2, 3, right? Keep it simple. Bam, I get the response. Great. What's the program? What does it cost for communication training for one of our VPs? Gave a price, said, I'm going to get this signed off on. I'll be in contact. Thank you. Bam. The clarity, right? It's just about being that clarity piece. Now didn't have the whole conversation, but that clarity point, I think it's very important. Instead of referring them to a website or attaching a pamphlet, would I have liked to ask a bunch of questions? Sure, I would have. But in this situation, this person was a 1-sentence type response person. And so I thought, I'm going to give a very limited amount of information and in the target of the area that I've helped people that she knows. So anyways, clarity, I think it's important too.
Yes. And one of the things I want to make a very, very critical thing is, as a salesperson, your clarity should be so good that sometimes you're understanding the problems they're facing. And sometimes you're identifying the trends and opportunity which they have not even recognized. And let me give you an example. Basically, I was in California and I was in a meeting and I was done with my meeting around 4 o'clock and my flight was at 7. And then one of them said, hey, basically, can you come back? He was a VP for a company. And he said, Raj, I really like what you have done. Can you come and meet my team? Basically, he had a CFO and a CEO who were there.
Okay.
I said, my only condition is make sure that I am in the airport to catch my flight here. I don't mind coming. And no presentation, nothing. And I went there, basically spent about an hour asking and basically following through this whole clarity piece of it and stuff. And I identified one thing which they need to work based on everything they said and why they were really struggling from a growth perspective. Their whole thing was they were thinking that they didn't have a good strategy plan. They were struggling with that piece of it. But the biggest part of it is they were having fewer people in one department where makes a big impact on their overall growth. And in less than an hour, we signed a contract and I started the assignment in 2 weeks after that. So less than an hour, I didn't even know the client. At 3 o'clock. And by 6:30, when I was going to the airport, I had a contract and everything going through.
That's fantastic.
And this is the example on the positive side. I want to go back and give you a second assignment. Basically, there was somebody who called me and said, Raj, we need this for my senior VP and his leadership team. There were 6 people. We need to do this. Can you go back and give us? So I started asking a lot of questions to get the clarity, but they said, hey, 2-word answers, 3-word answers, and everything else. I should have done a little more due diligence. In hindsight, I have not done that. So I sent a proposal to them based on what I heard in the 20 minutes. I was not happy with all the information, but because of my vast experience, I put it in there. So now it has been 4 weeks and I don't even get a response back. So they have the proposal, they have looked at everything else, but no answer. And that is a thing because I thought I had clarity, but our clarity was not there. I was not attuned to her needs or something was missing there. And the biggest part of it I learned from that piece of it is she was not the decision maker. So she was giving her interpretation of the need, and I was building on her interpretation of the need and the minimum information there. So the clarity piece was missing there. And because of the clarity piece, I could not go back and do it. I don't know where it is as of today. I don't have a yes or a no answer, but it is almost 4 weeks. And generally, when you don't have anything for 4 weeks, the probability is very low that it will happen.
Well, you win some, you lose some, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then hopefully we learn from every one of them. And that's the key, is the point that you're making right there, is that you know what you would do different on this time. You went back, you reflected. I think that's a key point that we haven't talked about it yet, but the idea of reflecting upon those times that you do, we never want to really reflect on what went right. We're just like, oh, I'm just good, But when a deal doesn't go through, we tend to take the opportunity to reflect on what happened and how we could do things differently. And now you know what you would do. So okay, let's just break that down. So would you go back and would you ask for a meeting with the decision maker? Is that kind of where you would do things differently and maybe have a more full conversation?
That's what I'm hoping for. I sent a couple of emails asking them to go back and say, hey, can we get on a call? One, to go back and make sure that you have received it and you're comfortable with it. 2, basically, does it meet your sponsor or whoever the leader brought it up and meet their needs or not? So I have not heard back anything else, but I'm waiting for that information. I'm going to pick up the phone call in the next couple of days and call and find out what is happening with there. But Drew, I want to go back to the point you just made, basically learning from what has not worked, learning from what has worked as well. Because one of the things is, if you do the analysis right, you can learn a lot from what has happened. Because when we go back and look at it, sometimes we think we got lucky. But there are certain things that you have done. So if you go back and the example I was talking about, 3 o'clock, I didn't know the client. By 6:30, I had this thing, right? That was one of the fastest deal I closed. And on the plane for 5 hours, I was just reflecting on that. And what I noticed is basically preparing a presentation, preparing a lot of things. Those are all good. But in the moment, in the presence, you're really trying to understand their needs by asking their questions and being present with everything that we are talking about, the mindset.
Mhm.
That can play a powerful role as well.
Yeah.
Like one of the things they were asking about it, and I said, hey, I didn't know I was coming here. I don't have a presentation, but if you want, I can show you a couple of slides. I worked with customer A, and I want to show you the slides. And then I pulled up something on the laptop, showed them, and explained how that was related to this. So I built trust and I built credibility because I was picking up something on the spot and showing them. So
Yeah.
that was a big learning for me.
Mhm.
And now 90% of the time, I don't go back and prepare any presentations to go with them. I do my homework, I do everything else, but
Yeah.
that has been working very well for me since then. So just to go back and say, even from your successes, you can go back and learn a
Yeah.
lot of things. So always I tell people is always reflect on basically your successes to say what went right and what can I learn so that I can transfer it to the other aspects of it. And if it did not work, what can I learn from that and what do I need to change?
Yeah. No, you're giving me some insights. So even once we get off the once we get done recording today, I'm going to send a follow-up email to this person and send my book in PDF version for credibility and say, if you want to know some of the topics that we'll be discussing if I end up coaching your VP, here's my book and you can look at it. And now she can take that to whoever is the final decision maker, and hopefully we'll get to, I'll have to tell you all on a different episode if I got the deal or not.
Yes, I mean, that's a very, very powerful thing. So now you have an instant credibility being an author. And so you can leverage that in so many different situations.
Yeah. I'm going to do
That's
it.
powerful.
All right.
All right.
What else you got for us?
So I think basically today I just wanted to go back and give an introduction to the mindset of it and why it is so important for the entrepreneurs to have the sales mindset. So one key thing I want all the entrepreneurs to take away is either one, they need to learn about the sales piece of it. The reason being is since they are the founders of the company, they know the product and service so very well, they are always going to be the best salesperson. They know the in and out of everything else. I can train somebody else, but they cannot be Raj when I'm doing the products or services because I have built everything from scratch.
Yeah.
And that is a very critical role when you're growing your organization, because until you get to 10, 12 employees, you are in a survival mode. Unless you're born with a golden spoon and you have an unlimited checkbook ability.
Yeah.
So that is the first piece of it. And the second piece of it from that piece of it is anytime you go back, even if you, let us say you're 50 employees, that sales skill is always there because you are the best spokesperson for your company and for your product or service.
Yeah.
Like even I remember when we were Jack Welch and GE, right? Basically, sometimes the salespeople could not go back and close a few deals. And Jack himself went into the meetings to go back and help some of the top salespeople.
Wow.
So for him, running a 330,000 employees company, and still he was in some sales meetings. So it doesn't matter how big or how small you are, that sales skill is going to be very important.
Yeah.
And the other part of it, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I was telling, basically, if you go back and look at the book, To Sell is Human.
Okay.
Now, every single person in any role you do, whatever it is, you are trying to convince people to change their thought process to your idea. So you're selling every single time. So it doesn't matter if you're a human being alive, 30 to 35% of what you do is selling.
Yeah. You're selling, I heard actually of all places in church, the pastor was saying there's a right time and a wrong time to present information to your spouse if you're married, right?
Yes.
And you know that if you've been at work all day and you both get home and the house is a mess and you've been picking up kids, that's not the time where you say, hey, I think I want to do a weekend with my guy friends, because there's overwhelm.
Yes.
But, you get the house in order, you fix things up, you take care of the kids, maybe you take them out of the house, let her have some time alone. And then she comes back from some time alone and you say, hey, I was thinking maybe I got a time. You have a better chance, right?
Yes.
In that moment. And like you said, you're selling, right? And it's about thinking about those factors, and we do it naturally in many situations, but something in our brain gets clogged when it has to do with products and services sometimes. And so I love that you mentioned earlier, you said that people need you need a process, you need to have a system or a way of selling. And that I want all the listeners to hear. That's what we're going to discuss in the next couple of weeks. Is in the next few episodes, we're going to discuss this process of selling that that you have really built out, and it's part of an assessment that you can do with people, so people can actually, I mean, how I don't know of any other sales process that I've heard of that you can get assessed on the front end and figure out your competency in selling, and then later on down the road you can get assessed again. I mean, we all know at the end of the day, it's about results, it's about performing,
Yes.
but how do you know what to fix? You know, do you need to fix your research and how you kind of think about the front end game and what you do on the front end, or do you need to get better at your soft skills, or do you need to get better at modifying and adapting in the middle of the process? And so we are going to discuss that. So I hope that this was a great episode about mindset, and really that entrepreneur's mindset, that as a salesperson, how they come into it. Raj, any parting thoughts before we hang up today?
So one of the things I have learned is sales is a science and an art.
Mm.
And what I mean today that basically 80% of it is science. Science is something basically you have a systematic process, you can follow the process.
Yeah.
So 80% of it, everybody can learn the sales process. The 20% of the piece of it is your creativity piece of it. How you take that, and that is where the art piece of it comes. So 80% is science, a process. And then 20% is your creativity side, where you can go back, customize it to your needs, make yourself comfortable with it so that you can go and meet your target audience.
Yeah.
So that 80-20 rule is very, very powerful in the sales process. And that is what we're going to go back and talk about in the next episode.
That's great. So what you're saying is that we can get better at sales.
Yes, definitely. Everybody can better. I am a great example. I have done zero sales in my life. And most of the people say, Raj, you are very, very good at sales. That's what they tell me.
You are fantastic at it. And so you have learned it and you have mastered it. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about it on the next episode. But with that, thank you all for listening to the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. It's always a pleasure, Raj, to hang out with you and to have these conversations. And I know that other entrepreneurs are getting value from this as well. That's it. I hope you have a great night, Raj. All the listeners, I hope you all have a great night. And we'll see you later.
Okay. Thank you, Drew. Talk to you on the next episode.